Great, thank you very much. Yes, so Sophie asked me to come along and share this tool with you, thought you all might be interested in this. So I will give you, I'm going to do a bit of a screen share of the tool in a moment, but I think before I do that, I'm just going to give you a bit of the background and the principles really of the tool. I'll run through the tool and then I'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. So I think probably the most important thing to get out of this presentation really is just an understanding of the principles of what we're trying to do with this tool in the GLA. So like rather than saying you should just use this tool off the shelf, it's perfect and it will work perfectly for everybody, I'd probably recommend kind of reflecting on what elements of it you think might be useful for your organization and what you could take from it. But essentially what it is, it's a simple Excel tool that kind of works like a checklist to think through. Not everything in the checklist will be relevant for your particular project or program that you're working on, but I would be surprised if you didn't find something that you could do to improve your projects and the outcomes. So in the GLA, we're recommending people use this tool at least twice. So once at the early design phase, so you do a first pass, really as early on in the project as possible to help you identify any changes that you could make to improve your project. And then once later on in the process, you complete it more thoroughly, update it with any changes that you've made and reassuring yourself that you've thought through things thoroughly and recording anything perhaps that you'd like to do but can't for whatever reason. So it's really a practical way of thinking through your project systematically in terms of any negative climate impacts at that early design stage that you might want to mitigate against, and also thinking about how you maximise those positive climate co-benefits. Just a little bit on the background of where it came from. We took the principles and idea of the tool from something called the Carbon and Co-Benefits Decision Support Tool. So this was developed by the Centre for Climate Change and Social Transformation and the Tyndall Centre, as well as the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So what we did initially was we took their tool and piloted it at the GLA, but we liked the idea of it, but it just didn't quite work for our types of projects. So we adapted it into something that would work for us. So I'd say, you know, if our tool looks useful to you, I would encourage you to think which bits would work. Also, you can have a look at the original Tyndall tool as well, as there may be other elements of that you might want to think about as well. And I'll share links to that as well afterwards. And they're also very happy for you to contact them, or we can put you in touch if that would be of interest. But just to recap on before I kind of open the tool and do a screen share, the principles of the tool are really that consistent checklist for all projects to work through, something that you do early on, but then iterate. The fact that it flags where suboptimal project design choices are being made or where positive co-benefits could be achieved. And you can do that then to make a to-do list during your design phase for anything that you want to do to improve your project. And it's also got a reporting function, so you can transparently record any trade-offs being made. You can, depending on how you want to use it in your organization, you can use that as an output sheet to communicate to people and kind of on a summary level. And then just finally, it's not about making every project a climate project at all. It's about putting a climate lens over your particular project and then thinking how you can maximize those co-benefits and minimize the negative impacts. So that's probably enough preamble. I'll share the tool now, just 1 second. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Now, if not,
can see it.
Great, yep. Excellent. Okay, so I'll just tell you a little bit about the structure of the tool. So we can ignore the cover sheet and instructions for now, but let's have a look at this kind of first project overview, really simple. I've done an example project. It's not a real project, but just it helps to kind of put it in perspective of an actual project. So I'm imagining I'm doing a kind of a renovation of a clinic. So, and this has a garden space around it that we're going to be putting some energy saving measures in there, as well as some shading measures and also some improvements to the garden. So it kind of falls in that retrofit category. Then the next, so that's the overview tab. Then there are 5 colourful climate tabs. And these relate to different project design themes where we can either have a positive or negative impact on the climate. So whether that's about climate resilience, our buildings, transport, waste, people. And then the grey tab is the Equalities Impact Assessment tab. And so in the GLA, this is where people can answer their EQIA questions. Then the white tab is where the results come through. You can't edit that. That kind of gets pulled through automatically. And then finally, we have the guidance tab, which has lots of information and links for you. So I'm going to just run through one of these climate tabs. I'll show you this. This is what an empty tool page looks like. And then if we look at this resilience tab, this is a partially filled in tool. So I'll just take you through this one tab for now. But the premise is similar for all the tabs, really. So if we have a look at this, so what you can see is there are each of these numbered rows. These represent positive outcomes that ideally we would see from our projects. And it's asking if your project that you're working on could work to support that outcome. It doesn't have to support them if it's not appropriate or possible. It may support one or two. It may, on this particular tab, it may not support any. But the idea is that, you know, for you to think about whether a modification to your project could mean it delivers benefits in any of these areas. So looking at this resilience tab, I'll just tell you a bit about these. I'll just talk through these outcomes a little bit. So the first two outcomes here, these relate to adapting to long-term changes to climate. So things like the higher temperatures or longer drought seasons. The first one is about training processes and guidance for people in organizations to ensure that they can live and work safely in those conditions. And then the second one is about physical assets and buildings and spaces and protecting them from those long-term changes. Then the next two are about improving resilience to short-term climate shocks. So things like floods, fire, emergency events. We've got one on people again, and then one on our physical assets and spaces. And then the next three relate to green spaces and ecology. So increasing the amount of it, increasing access of people to that space, and also improving the ecosystems within it. So you're being asked, you know, or if you're using this, you're being asked whether your project is delivering against these outcomes. If you aren't sure, you can click on the link to guidance and it takes you to the right place in the guidance tab. So it tells you why we're asking this, what would support it, and also key demographics affected, which might help you in also when thinking about questions for your EQIA. And it also provides some links to other useful information. Going back to this tab then, what you then do is as you go through, you go through answering these questions in column E. So there's a drop-down list and you answer these questions. And then in column F, you explain your answer. 1 or 2 sentences is totally fine. And then you use this strengthening positive outcomes column to think about how you could realistically improve your project to deliver for this outcome. Or if you've said it's a negative outcome, what you could do to flip it to a positive one. So I'm just going to just take you through this really briefly, what I've done here. So I'm imagining I'm doing this as a first pass for this retrofit project that I'm doing. I didn't really think of anything much for this first one, so I hadn't thought about this. So I wasn't sure. I had a look at the guidance. It talked about hotter summers, and I wondered, as I'm developing this project, I should probably consider whether we have a policy on kind of working environments in hot summer temperatures if they're going to be more frequent. One for the workers that are kind of doing the construction, but also in the building in the long term. So I'm going to have a look into that as I develop the project. Then there's this question about making sure that the building itself is adapted to hotter summers, etc. And I had already thought about this. I know it's going to have a positive impact because we've made sure that we're going to have shading on the buildings. We're also planting trees in the garden, so we think this one I'm happy with. Then these other two about the climate shocks, I hadn't thought about this. I had a look how I wasn't sure about how this could affect people. Talks about and on the guidance tab, it told me about, suggested I think about things like, could we have water fountains? If it's very hot, people have access to water fountains in public areas, and perhaps we could provide is this a kind of public space? Could we provide some kind of cool space that people can go to if there is a heat wave? So that I'm going to consider. If that's might not be able to do it, but that's something I'll have a think about, speak to somebody about. And then this other one about the building itself, dealing with climate shocks. So that might be something like flash flooding, and that is potentially a risk in this building. So as we're developing the garden area, I'm going to have a look at whether we can have any sustainable urban drainage systems in the garden. So that's something I'm going to look at as I develop this project. The next three I'm all pretty happy with, because I'm improving a scrubby space and making it better. But even though that is already good, the guidance did make me think that having some water in even a small garden is really helpful. So I will have a look and see if we can maybe have a small pond in that space with improved biodiversity. But yeah, I'm happy, with staff and visitors are going to have access to this garden, and we're going to have lots of, variety of planting and trees and things like that. So that's all going to be really positive in relation to those. So you answer your questions like this, and then as you go through your project, you design, you might be able to update this hopefully and to get some of these not considered to positive or not applicable, or you say, I looked at this, but it wasn't possible we didn't have the funding for X, Y, Z. And as you scroll down, there's these two, what we kind of call double check type questions. And these are to make sure that no negative things are slipping through the gap that are really, really important. So this one is about making sure that there's no net loss in the amount of habitats or ecology in the area. And I'm confident there's not, so I've said no, because there's going to be an increase. It's also reminding me that I need to check that we're not going to be disturbing any kind of protected species or anything like that. I've checked that and that's not an issue. So that's how I answered those questions. And then what happens at the end is you get this overall RAG rating. And that's, if you want to kind of report this to others or have a record of this is where this comes in really useful. So I've got an overall RAG rating of green, and I've got this space here to put one or two sentences really to summarize that whole page, so that nobody has to read the whole thing, but you can just explain. So I said I've got a green rating here because I'm going to be including shading on the buildings to protect from that summer heat. There will be an improvement in green space and access for visitors, and I've also managed to, I'm coming back to this later, I've managed to ensure we've got suds in that garden, and we're going to have a water fountain in the public space, and that's going to help improve climate resilience. So that's this RAG rating, and a couple of sentences get pulled through onto the results page automatically. I don't have time to go through all the tabs, so I'm not going to do that, but essentially it's the same process for each of them. And then, yeah, as I said, depending on how you answer, you get a different RAG rating for each tab. I'll just mention the EQIA tab. It contains all the usual EQIA questions that we have here in the GLA. You can fill it out in this form if this is helpful, or we allow people to just link to it. But it's I think there is one kind of thing that is additional that we have included here, which is we have a space where where you can think about, or you can add anything that you particularly need to consider for specific groups of people that would be affected by your project in relation to the climate risks and measures that you've identified. So anything you'd need to do specifically. And then if helpful, there's also this space to summarize your EQIA and have that pulled through into your results tab as well. So this is what the results tab looks like. And as you can see, I've only filled in the first tab, but as you can see, it had pulled through that green and then my couple of sentences. And if I just zoom out a bit little, you'll see you get one for each of the different areas. The equalities impact assessment tool, this is the one at the bottom. We don't RAG rate that, but that's the summary tab. So if you just wanted to share this with senior decision makers, the idea would be that you can just copy that, Control-C, Control-V, put it in your Word document. And that is essentially your summary tab, and they understand in these different areas any impacts or trade-offs that you're identifying. So just to summarize, you do this first pass to flag areas to look at in more detail. Then you do it, you develop the project bearing in mind those questions that you set yourself or things to look into. You then complete the tool properly, and explain your scoring, and then you can use this results tab as appropriate in your organization, either to show you've done this process of embedding climate, to explain particular trade-offs, or if you want to identify particular blockers. So something might come out red and you can kind of flag, well, this is red because of this, and it might be out of your control, but this is a way to kind of flag that here. I'll just say there's, before I kind of open up for if anyone has any questions, I think there are a few learnings from the process that we've gone through in terms of this. I think firstly, there are options, as I said already. You can try our tool, you can try others, or you can make something. You can use this Excel tool and it's freely available. You can rip it up and change it a little bit if you want. But yeah, I would encourage to think about what will be what's useful. There's that kind of there's different purposes of it. There's the kind of making your project better, but also that reporting function. I would say one of the things that's been really helpful for us is to include training on this and doing a worked example within our climate literacy training that we've been running at the GLA. So you build kind of understanding and also appetite for using the tool from the bottom up. So we're getting a lot of buy-in for the tool as a result of that training. I think more than if we just told everybody that they had to use it. And, we're getting people making pledges that they're going to encourage people in their teams or others or promote it more widely. However, that said, the bottom up encouraging people to use it is great. Ideally, like if you can include something like this as a formal step that people have to go in their project management process, that would be better. But realize that's not always possible. And then finally, I understand it can look overwhelming that you've got all these questions, etc. But just to say, if it's not relevant, then you don't have to answer it. You can just say, no, that's definitely not relevant. There might be whole tabs about transport that are just completely irrelevant to your. But if they are relevant, then it is an indication that you probably should be taking the time to consider them fully. So I'm going to leave it there. I'll stop sharing. And I don't know if anybody has any questions or would like to know anything more about the tool.
Thank you very much, Claire. That was great. I love a good tool. I always find them handy to sort of keep a track of things. I'm loving a lot of aspects of that, including like the reporting side and whether we can sort of use that for our environmental management system, and maybe even link things into our risk reporting potentially with your RAG there. I was just wondering whether or not you think that there's a use for the tool from the procurement perspective, or whether there could be opportunities to include a procurement tool tab, in there as part of that. I'm not sure, just an idea.
Yeah, no, that's great idea. And one tab that I didn't show is our people tab, and I do think that's where the procurement side comes up a little bit. But we also have a kind of any other relevant. I'll just share this one just really quickly, just so I can show you what I'm talking about. So this tab here, the people tab, we have this other one where you could write something in here, an outcome that is really important to you, might be about procurement. But I think there's a few questions here that that do relate to procurement. For example, supporting organisations that are pioneering climate action, reducing the climate impact of businesses that you work with. So you might kind of see that, oh, okay, what can I do in my procurement process? I think that would be a particular area once you work through that. There was something the other day, a colleague sent me one of these tools and said, it was literally just a procurement of a data platform, and I was looking at all these different tabs, I was thinking, yeah, not relevant. And then I looked at this one and I was thinking, actually, well, you can have impact on your supply chain, and it kind of flagged it here. So that would be an example of going through it really quickly, but yeah, reminding you that actually there is stuff that you can do in your supply chain.
Brilliant, thank you, that's great. Handing over to anybody else for any questions. And Tari's hands up.
Yeah, like I thought, Claire, like it's a very handy tool, and like I've been through the process of using it myself, and also like some tabs were more relevant than others. But I was just thinking, You know, like a lot of our members are like in the stage of developing various strategies and plans, and just like thinking, how can they update the plan to somewhat link to these strategies? Are there any tips how you could customize it, or something that you should think about, like, you know, to make the plan, the tool a bit more relevant to their organizations?
So can you try me again on that question?
Yeah. So basically, I guess, like, you know, are there any considerations that people should keep in mind when they are trying to, or if they are trying to update this tool for their organizations? Having gone through the process to making it suitable for GLA, are there any key learnings, for instance?
I see. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I understand. I think so for example, the reason that we didn't get on that well with the one from Manchester was because Greater Manchester's combined authority, they do a lot more delivery, like, you know, of waste contracts and things than we do. It was a much more kind of projecty, whereas a lot of the stuff that we do in the GLA is more strategic. Yeah, it was too specific. That was why I was saying, you know, you might want to kind of have a look at that one and think, actually, that one is more kind of relevant to our organization. Also, you know, I think things like, okay, this is just about climate, but there are maybe other objectives that you want to include as well around health or housing, or I don't know, other priorities. So I think that's something to think about as well, if you were updating it. I think the main thing is thinking, who's going to be using it, and do these questions make sense to them? So when we piloted it, we kind of got quite a bit of feedback of people saying, well, my project is so high level that this asking me about a specific kind of building in a specific place is just too specific. So we had to kind of generalize it quite a bit to kind of, you know, cover those more strategic ones, but also if it is a very specific project, to cover that. So I think, yeah, thinking about the kinds of project that you'd want to use it, thinking about the questions and thinking, do they need to be more specific or less? And then, yeah, any other lenses that you want to bring in on this as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Claire. And our next question comes from Carolyn.
Hi there. Claire, I was just wondering, because I know this is the type of question that I will get, do any of the questions, or, you know, the factors that we're considering, link back to any standards, so that we could say, you know, we're asking this because we wish to be compliant to this?
Yeah, so I think this mostly comes in on the buildings tab, which I didn't show, where we kind of refer to London Plan standards. So we've got some questions in there around, you know, firstly around maintaining buildings. So having that kind of hierarchy of maintaining buildings first, and then if you're building something new, making sure it goes to, from our perspective, that it meets London Plan building standards. And then kind of trying to get rid of gas boilers or things like that. So I think there is in that, if you can have a look at the tool and have a look at that buildings tab, and you can see what I mean there. We also say, you know, if you're retrofitting a building, do you get it up to EPC B or DEC B? You could think, is that appropriate? What could I put as my standard there? And then, you know, getting people to answer in relation to that. So there's definitely that scope to put very specific standards that you're requesting people to get to. You may have different standards to the ones we put in there, but that's also, you can tweak it.
Thank you so much. That was a good question. And we've now got Edward's got a question.
Sorry, I forgot to have my hand up. Yeah, it's really useful. So just been digging around. I mean, the guidance is really useful. I think it breaks down the considerations really well. I think someone mentioned about how we would slot it into the process, you know, of things that we're doing. So I oversee estates for a college and a multi-academy trust, and there's lots of considerations we have here. So I suppose I'm trying to understand how we might drop it into our existing processes. I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's really well laid out. I think it's an incredibly useful reference tool for me. And yeah, sorry, the other question I had is it being updated, and if so, how do we know that it's been updated, or is it static, is it one-off thing?
Yeah, so I think we may update it in future, but at the moment I don't unless we get lots of feedback from people saying this really doesn't make sense, we've got it on the data store. It's an Excel tool. You can download it. If you like it as it is, you can use that. That's fine. It's not something that we are saying people have to use it as it is. I think with all these things, it's helpful to start with something, but making it bespoke to your organization. We can definitely there's no plans to update it yet. I think the one thing that we would do, but it didn't make sense to do it just yet, is maybe make it a kind of an online tool rather than an Excel, because like Excel are awful. But actually, it's actually been really helpful to have it this way, because in this kind of early stage of kind of sharing it, it's much easier for you guys. Like if you think, actually, I don't like that question, or it doesn't work for my organization, you can just delete it. Whereas if it's in a bit of software, it's really inaccessible. So no plans to update it, but you can update it yourself, and we can let you know on the data store if there is a big round of updates. We can always do another like info session like this.
Yeah, okay, lovely, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's another good question, especially in relation to considerations for us if we take it offline and put it on our systems around legislative changes or something. So let's say the waste tab, for example. And we have Sophie has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie, and thanks, Claire. It's not a question, don't worry, Claire. It's I just wanted to really pick out and emphasise for our members a little bit more on something Claire touched on. So our internal climate literacy training, as Claire mentioned, we emphasise the use of the tool during that training. And I'm one of the trainers, so I've now done multiple trainings, and these climate literacy trainings target people from way across our organisation. So these are not people who are coming with a mandate for, explicitly working on climate, sustainability, environment, etc. I mean, that's obviously exactly what climate literacy is for. And I think the reactions and the level of engagement with the tool has been really quite amazing. People do tend to look at it and think, oh my goodness, this is a huge Excel document. But actually, because it's a little bit of like a guided walkthrough, it's very easy for people to kind of get into it. And what we find is in the session with climate literacy, often the room is almost like silent at the point when people are engaging with it, because they're just so kind of drawn into reading the outcomes and thinking about the how they might answer it. We give them fictional scenarios to populate it as a bit of a task. And the reason we do that is because then we can choose 3 fictional scenarios that are very different. And one of those is an event, so a kind of physical time-bound event. One of them is developing a new strategy, and one of them is perhaps a more traditional program of work with kind of ongoing budget and implementation. And so that, I really just wanted to draw that point out, that it can be a really, really great tool for engaging your colleagues and staff. And for you, if a bit like we were just talking about editing the tool itself, maybe you can think also about how it's framed. If the phrasing of climate inequalities isn't going to resonate as much internally, but you've done really good work in terms of raising terminology on sustainability or green or whatever it might be, also think about how you might be framing it to help people deliver on their commitments in that. Have they made internal pledges, or could they? And I think I find it personally very rewarding to see how people across our organisation engage with it. And so very happy if anyone else wants to discuss it with me, or via me, I can send any further questions to Claire as well.
Thanks, Sophie. And that follows on to something that I had been thinking about. So we've got a couple of new project managers who are studying in our capital works project, and I was thinking about how they might be able to particularly use the building and energy or waste tabs as part of that work. But do you think there's any possibility that you guys might be able to do like a train the trainer session or something if we do start using these tools, so that we can do what you're doing internally? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we have already recorded a video, someone talking through it in more detail than I just did, but very similar. So we can share that with you. You might just need to edit off the end, because it says then you've got to email it to me. So we don't want all your kind of forms. I mean, we're happy to hear how you're getting on, but you probably don't want to share them. So yeah, I think there's a little bit at the end that we could delete, but if that's helpful, happy to again kind of do another presentation. Obviously, it's great to hear, that if these ideas are getting taken up, but also, yeah, we can also share that video with you as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would be great. Yeah, try and pilot it that way or something. That's how I'd do it if anybody else thinks that might be of interest. So thank you very much, Claire. That was